After soldiers in Gabon announced that they had deposed the country's president on August 30, many residents danced in the streets and declared themselves free from the presidential family's 56-year rule. It is becoming a familiar scene in West and Central Africa, which has recorded coups in 7 countries since 2020. On August 30, minutes after Gabon's election commission announced that President Ali Ondimba Bongo had been elected to a third term, a group of senior Gabonese military officers from the elite Presidential Guard unit seized power and placed the president under arrest at his palace. Ali Bongo's family had been in power for 56 years. And Niger also had a coup in July. Even as other African countries threatened military intervention unless the coup was reversed in Niger's capital Niamey, thousands rallied in support of the military leaders, denouncing West African sanctions and calling for withdrawals of foreign troops. The presence of US and French military bases in the country aimed at combating Islamist militants was a focal point of concern among the protesters. Now the question arises, why are people in Africa celebrating military coups against democratically elected leaders? These celebrations are an expression of popular dissatisfaction. Across much of West and Central Africa, younger citizens have become widely disenchanted within the traditional political class, even with those who have been legitimately elected to office. There are several reasons for this disenchantment. Formal and informal jobs are few, rampant corruption, especially among ruling classes, and the high cost of food and other basic necessities. One more factor driving the apparent support for military takeovers is the belief in influence that foreign nations, including France, as a former colonial power, exert over governments in the area. Both the US and France have military presence in Niger, mostly to fight Islamist terror groups like the Al-Qaeda, ISIS and the Boko Haram, but also to secure interests of foreign powers that have invested in the country's mining sector. Similarly, Gabon is also rich in oil reserves, yet 1/3 of its population remains below the poverty line. Also, there is a deep resentment at the way many civilian rulers manipulate electoral processes or even the constitution to prolong their hold on power. This allows leaders to remain in power for decades, fueling resentment in people. Over the past years, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, Sudan and Gabon have all been hit by military intervention. France was the major colonial power in West and Central Africa and has retained its influence in the region even after countries became independent. France has maintained relations with the elite ruling class in a bid to retain its economic and political power in the region. But as the ruling class grew unpopular, French reputation has also suffered. Even today, France has about 5,500 troops in 6 African countries, fueling resentment in the local population. Coups in Mali and Burkina Faso brought anti-colonial military leaders in power. These governments kicked out French troops and hired mercenaries from the Kremlin-linked Wagner group. Even in Niger, the new military leadership has severed its security ties with France. France also had to suspend its military operations in the Central African Republic due to anti-French sentiments in the country. In a setback to French and Western powers, many countries rich in natural resources have grown closer to China and Russia while trying to break free from French influence. To sum up, here are some possible reasons why people in Africa are celebrating military coups against alleged French-installed leaders. Frustration with corruption and misrule. Many African countries are plagued by corruption and misrule and are often frustrated with the lack of progress and opportunity. Military coups are seen as a way to overthrow corrupt leaders and bring about change. Anti-French sentiment. There is a lot of anti-French sentiment in Africa due to France's colonial legacy and its continuing interference in African affairs. Military coups are seen as a way to break free from French influence. Hope for a fresh beginning. Many people in Africa believe that military coups can lead to a real democracy as the influence of ruling families would wane. However, there is no guarantee that this will happen, as often coup leaders turn into military dictators. A Times Online report.